Angela Simpson. In early August 2009, 46-year-old Terry Neely, a disabled man who relied on a wheelchair, disappeared after leaving his assisted living facility in Phoenix, Arizona. 3 days later, on August 5th, firefighters discovered his dismembered and burned remains inside a trash bin behind a vacant building. Investigators determined he had endured 3 days of torture before being killed. The case led police to 33-year-old Angela Simpson after evidence showed she had lured Neely to her apartment, where she subjected him to unimaginable brutality. Over the course of 3 days, Simpson beat him, stabbed him nearly 50 times, smashed his body with a tire iron, extracted his teeth, and hammered a nail into his skull before strangling him to death. She then dismembered his body and set the remains on fire in an attempt to conceal the crime. Simpson was arrested shortly after the discovery, and in subsequent interviews she showed no remorse. She openly admitted to killing Neely because she believed he was a snitch and told reporters she would have killed more people if given the chance. Her chilling lack of regret set her apart from other convicted killers and shocked the public. On March 22, 2012, Simpson pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, kidnapping, and abandonment of a body, and less than 2 weeks later, on April 2, 2012, she was sentenced in Maricopa County Superior Court to natural life in prison, plus 14 additional years for the related charges. Rachel Henry. In January 2020, 22-year-old Rachel Henry killed her 3 children inside their Phoenix home. According to police and court records, she smothered 3-year-old Zane, 1-year-old Mariah, and 7-month-old Catalaya one by one, later staging their bodies on a couch to make it appear as if they were sleeping. Investigators revealed that she even sang lullabies during the killings, and afterward told officers she did not remember committing the acts. On January 27, 2020, a Maricopa County grand jury indicted her on 3 counts of first-degree murder, each of them being a Class 1 felony. After initially pleading not guilty, Rachel changed her plea. In December 2024, she entered a guilty plea to 3 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. On February 14, 2025, at the age of 27, Rachel Henry was sentenced in Maricopa County Superior Court to 3 consecutive natural life in prison terms, meaning she will never be eligible for release. Yui Inoue. In May 2021, Tempe police officers responded to an apartment after a domestic dispute between 44-year-old Yui Inoue and her estranged husband. Officers checked on the couple's 2 children, 9-year-old Mia and 7-year-old Kai, and found them alive and asleep. Hours later, Inoue walked into a Tempe police substation and told officers she had heard voices saying she killed her children and had seen blood. When officers returned to the apartment, they found the 2 children dead. Both victims had suffered multiple sharp force and chopping injuries caused by a meat cleaver. The injuries included lacerations, cuts, amputations, and defensive wounds. Investigators determined that after killing the children, Inoue showered, discarded her bloody clothing, attempted to clean the weapon, and covered the children's bodies with trash and a mattress. She also packed a backpack with her passport, cash, and jewelry before leaving the apartment and going to the police station. A Maricopa County jury later convicted Inoue of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of child abuse, and 1 count of disorderly conduct. Prosecutors argued that the murders were deliberate and premeditated, while the defense claimed she was driven by mental illness and lacked the strength to commit the acts. On May 2, 2025, Judge Jeffrey Reuter sentenced Yui Inoue to 2 consecutive natural life terms for the murders, plus 20 years for child abuse and 15 years for disorderly conduct, all to be served consecutively. During sentencing, Judge Reuter called the case one of the toughest he had ever presided over, stating, "Words can't adequately describe what occurred. I can't imagine what those children went through in their last minutes, the fear, the pain, the suffering. It's incomprehensible." Brittany Zamora. In 2018, in the quiet suburb of Goodyear, Arizona, the name Brittany Zamora went from a celebrated teacher to convicted felon almost overnight. Zamora, who was just 27 years old, was employed as a 6th-grade teacher at Las Brisas Academy. She was married, trusted, and admired by many parents, But beneath that image, she was hiding a dark secret that shocked the entire community. Court documents reveal that Zamora began grooming one of her 13-year-old male students through messages on a classroom communication app. What began as flirtatious exchanges quickly escalated as it was found that she sent him explicit texts, arranged private meetings, and initiated sexual encounters, sometimes in her car and other times in her own classroom after school hours. Disturbingly, one incident even unfolded while another student stood nearby as a lookout. The abuse only came to light when the victim's parents noticed strange behavior and installed monitoring software on his phone. What they found were dozens of explicit exchanges and pleas from Zamora urging the boy not to reveal their secret. In March 2018, Goodyear police arrested her after confronting her with the digital evidence. Investigators later confirmed she had also attempted to entice another minor in similar ways, broadening the scope of the case. By July 2019, Zamora stood in a Maricopa County courtroom facing felony charges. She pleaded guilty to sexual conduct with a minor, attempted molestation, and public sexual indecency. On July 12, 2019, Brittany Zamora was sentenced to 20 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections, followed by lifetime probation and mandatory sex offender registration. Wendy Elizabeth Andriano. In October 2000, Wendy Elizabeth Andriano poisoned and brutally killed her husband Joseph Joe Andriano inside their Phoenix apartment. Joe was only 33 years old and suffering from terminal cancer. In an effort to end his life that night, Wendy administered sodium azide, a rare and highly toxic chemical, but when the poison did not act fast enough, she struck him repeatedly with a bar stool, inflicting 23 head wounds, and stabbed him in the neck. After the killing, Wendy called 911 and claimed she had acted in self-defense, alleging that Joe had attacked her despite his deteriorating health. Investigators quickly determined that her story did not match the physical evidence. The medical examiner confirmed that the poisoning and bludgeoning were deliberate, and prosecutors discovered evidence that Wendy had been pursuing extramarital affairs and attempting to profit from her husband's death through fraudulent life insurance applications. Witnesses testified that she had even asked friends to impersonate Joe for physical exams in order to secure policies. Wendy was arrested the same day and charged with first-degree murder. Her trial began in Maricopa County in 2004, and on November 18 the jury found her guilty. Testimony about her affairs, the calculated purchase of sodium azide under a false name, and her pursuit of financial gain proved devastating to her defense. On December 22, 2004, Wendy Andriano was sentenced to death by lethal injection. She remains on death row at Perryville Prison in Goodyear, Arizona. Shauna Ford. On the night of May 30, 2009, in the rural town of Arivaca, Arizona, Shauna Ford led a violent home invasion that would shock the entire nation. Ford, a 41-year-old anti-immigration activist and founder of the group Minutemen American Defense, plotted the raid alongside her accomplices Jason Eugene Bush and Albert Gaxiola. She believed the Flores family kept drugs and money in their home, and she intended to steal it to fund her vigilante organization. Disguised as law enforcement officers, the intruders forced their way into the home of 29-year-old Raul Flores Jr. and his wife Gina Gonzalez. Once inside, they opened fire, killing Raul immediately, and while their 9-year-old daughter Brisenia Flores pleaded for her life, Bush shot her point blank as she begged. Raul's wife Gina, though shot 3 times, managed to survive by playing dead, and moments later she retrieved a handgun and returned fire, wounding Bush in the leg and forcing the attackers to flee into the desert. Investigators quickly linked the crime back to Shauna Ford. Her extremist ties, communications, and the testimony of the surviving mother revealed her central role in organizing the murders. She was arrested in June 2009, and prosecutors described her as the mastermind who used ideology as a cover for robbery and bloodshed. On February 14, 2011, a jury in Pima County Superior Court found Shauna Ford guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, burglary, armed robbery, and aggravated assault. She was sentenced to death, and today she remains on death row at the Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville. Samantha Allen. In July 2011, 10-year-old May Lynn Deal lost her life in Phoenix, Arizona, after being locked inside a small plastic storage container. Investigators later revealed that her cousin Samantha Allen, known at that time as Samantha Uriarte, and Samantha's husband John Allen forced May into the box as punishment for allegedly taking a popsicle. They locked the lid and left her in the sweltering summer heat, where she suffocated to death. May had suffered a long history of abuse inside the household, and reports showed that she was subjected to degrading punishments such as being forced to eat dog feces, crush cans barefoot, endure hot sauce, and withstand beatings with paddles. On the day she died, witnesses said she was made to run in 103-degree heat and perform strenuous exercises before being shut inside the container. At first, family members claimed she had accidentally locked herself in during a game of hide-and-seek, but those statements unraveled under police questioning. Evidence and confessions confirmed that Samantha and John Allen deliberately sealed her inside as discipline. Other relatives were also implicated in years of mistreatment. May's aunt and legal guardian Cynthia Stoltzman pleaded guilty and, in September 2013, was sentenced to 24 years in prison with lifetime probation. May's grandmother Judith Deal also pleaded guilty and received a 10-year term plus probation, while her father David Deal admitted to attempted child abuse and was sentenced to 14 years in 2013. On August 7, 2017, a jury found Samantha Allen guilty of first-degree murder, and the court sentenced her to death, along with an additional 74 years for child abuse and conspiracy charges. Her husband, John Allen, was convicted as well, and on November 17, 2017, he also received a death sentence. Samantha Allen continues to await execution on Arizona's death row. Jodi Arias. On June 4, 2008, in Mesa, Arizona, 30-year-old Travis Victor Alexander was murdered inside his own home. He suffered 27 stab wounds, his throat was slit from ear to ear, and he was shot once in the head. The crime scene revealed extreme violence and pointed investigators towards someone close to him: his former girlfriend, Jodi Arias. Arias had met Alexander in 2006 at a business convention connected to the prepaid legal services network. Their relationship was intense but unstable, and by 2007 it had dissolved. Friends and prosecutors later described Arias as obsessive, citing incidents where she slashed Alexander's tires and hacked into his private accounts. The investigation found crucial evidence. A digital camera recovered from Alexander's washing machine contained images of both Arias and Alexander taken on June 4th, including photographs time-stamped just minutes before his death. Detectives also traced Arias's movements across several states, noting her unusual efforts to conceal the trip, including carrying extra gas cans to avoid stops. A grand jury indicted Arias for first-degree murder on July 9, 2008, and she was arrested less than a week later on July 15 at her grandparents' home in Yreka, California, before being extradited to Arizona. During questioning, Arias gave shifting stories. She first denied being in Mesa, then blamed intruders, and finally admitted she killed Alexander but claimed it was in self-defense. On May 8, 2013, Jodi Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder, and the jury contemplated a death penalty. 2 years later, on April 13, 2015, Judge Sherry Steffens sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marissa Suzanne DeVault. In January 2009 in Gilbert, Arizona, Marissa Suzanne DeVault launched a brutal attack on her husband Dale Harrell while he slept. She struck him multiple times in the head with a hammer, causing injuries so severe that he never recovered. Harrell died on February 9, 2009, from complications caused by the head trauma. At first, Marissa told investigators that Harrell had attacked her, and she claimed another man, Stanley Cook Jr., stepped in and beat Harrell. Detectives quickly disproved that story, clearing Cook with forensic evidence. Confronted with the facts, Marissa eventually admitted that she herself had carried out the hammer attack. Marissa later filed a lengthy confession in which she claimed Harrell had subjected her to years of physical and sexual abuse, and she also alleged that the killing was a sudden response to this abuse. Investigators, however, found no corroborating evidence of her claims. Instead, they uncovered a financial motive. Records showed that she owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to Alan Flores, a man she was romantically involved with, and prosecutors argued that she murdered her husband to free herself from debt and potentially benefit from life insurance. On April 8, 2014, a jury found Marissa DeVault guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, and also concluded that the killing was committed in an especially cruel manner, making her eligible for the death penalty. During the penalty phase, however, the jury decided against execution and recommended life in prison. On June 6, 2014, Judge Roland Steinley formally sentenced her to natural life in prison, meaning she will never be eligible for parole. Pamela Phillips? On November 1, 1996, Tucson real estate developer Gary Triano was killed when a pipe bomb exploded in his Lincoln Town Car outside La Paloma Country Club in Catalina Foothills, Arizona. Investigators discovered that his ex-wife, Pamela Phillips, a former model and real estate agent, had orchestrated the attack. She had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on Triano, in which she was named as trustee, and she stood to benefit financially from his death. Authorities later uncovered that Phillips conspired with Ronald Young, a man she had met in Aspen, Colorado. Young was responsible for carrying out the bombing in exchange for payment. Evidence linked him to the crime after police found an abandoned van in California containing maps of Tucson, divorce documents, and papers related to Gary Triano. Young was arrested in 2005 and eventually convicted in 2010 of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. Phillips, meanwhile, fled the country, but in December 2009 she was arrested in Vienna, Austria, and extradited back to the United States after being indicted the year before. Her legal proceedings dragged on for years. In 2011, a judge initially ruled her incompetent to stand trial, but in 2012 she was deemed competent, clearing the way for prosecution. Her trial began in early 2014 and lasted 7 weeks. On February 18, 2014, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy, and on May 22 she was sentenced to natural life in prison, ensuring she will never be released. Marjorie Orbin. In Phoenix, Arizona, on September 8, 2004, Jay Orbin, a jewelry and art dealer, returned home from a business trip to Florida. It was his 45th birthday and, after dropping off a gift for his wife Marjorie Orbin, he was never seen alive again. Weeks later, on October 23, 2004, a transient discovered a large plastic container in the desert north of Phoenix. Inside was Jay Orbin's dismembered torso, wrapped in black plastic. His head and limbs were never found. Detectives quickly focused on Marjorie Orbin, a former Las Vegas showgirl turned businesswoman who had been married to Jay since the late 1990s. Surveillance footage showed her purchasing large storage containers with Jay's credit card just days after he disappeared. Investigators uncovered evidence that Marjorie had been living a double life, spending recklessly, carrying on affairs, and facing mounting debts. They alleged that she shot Jay, possibly with his own gun, dismembered his body using jigsaw blades, froze the torso, and later placed it in the desert container. At trial, prosecutors presented testimony from a former cellmate who claimed Marjorie confessed, saying she did it. The witness also described how Marjorie spoke about dismembering Jay and disposing of his remains. The defense countered by suggesting Marjorie's boyfriend, Larry Weisberg, was the real killer, but prosecutors had granted him use immunity and did not charge him. In 2009, Marjorie Orbin was found guilty of first-degree murder, 2 counts of theft, and 2 counts of fraudulent schemes. On October 1, 2009, she was sentenced to natural life in prison without parole, along with concurrent prison terms for the additional charges. Jerice Hunter. On October 11, 2011, 5-year-old Jessie Shockley was reported missing from her family's home in Glendale, Arizona. Her mother, Jerice Hunter, claimed she had gone shopping and returned to find her daughter gone. But investigators soon discovered that this was not an abduction, but a cover-up. Jerice Hunter was no stranger to child abuse. Years earlier in California, she had been convicted of abusing her other children, locking them in closets and starving them. She served about 4 years in prison before being paroled in 2010, and yet she regained custody of young Jesse when she moved to Arizona. Witnesses later testified that Jesse endured the same horrific treatment, and prosecutors revealed that Hunter beat her daughter, locked her in a closet without food or water, and left her there until she died. Despite a massive search, Jesse's body was never found. A neighbor recalled seeing Hunter pushing a suitcase and placing it in a Tempe dumpster, a suitcase prosecutors said contained the little girl's remains. After a year-long investigation involving Glendale Police, the FBI, and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, Hunter was arrested on September 6, 2012, and indicted on charges of first-degree murder and child abuse. On July 17, 2015, the court sentenced Jerice Hunter to natural life in prison for first-degree murder, plus an additional 20 years for child abuse. Elizabeth Archebec. In March 2020, police in Flagstaff, Arizona were called to the home of Elizabeth Archebec and her partner Anthony Martinez. When they got inside, they discovered a scene that stunned even experienced investigators. 6-year-old Deshaun Martinez was unresponsive, weighing only 18 pounds at the time of his death. His body so emaciated it appeared closer to that of a toddler. A medical examiner later determined he had died of malnutrition, the result of deliberate starvation. Investigators learned that Deshaun and his 7-year-old brother were routinely confined to a small bedroom closet, measuring roughly 21 by 25 inches, for up to 16 hours a day. They were locked inside as punishment for what the parents claimed was stealing food at night. The closet smelled strongly of urine, and the boys were denied adequate food for long periods. The older sister in the home did not show signs of similar abuse. Elizabeth Archebec was arrested in March 2020, alongside Anthony Martinez and the children's grandmother, Anne-Marie Martinez. A grand jury indicted all three on charges of first-degree murder, child abuse, and kidnapping. In May 2023, Archebec pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and child abuse, and on July 27, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Anthony Martinez was found guilty of murder, child abuse, kidnapping, and aggravated assault in 2024, and was sentenced to life in prison. The grandmother, Anne-Marie Martinez, was sentenced to 20 years after pleading guilty. Brittany Velasquez. On March 27, 2018, 20-year-old Brittany Velasquez was arrested in Superior Pinal County, Arizona, after authorities discovered her 2 young children dead inside her vehicle. The toddlers, who were approximately 2 years old and 10 months old, were found strapped into their car seats after being left unattended for more than 14 hours. Investigators determined that the children died of exposure to extreme heat, and the autopsy revealed no signs of trauma or drugs, only the devastating effects of prolonged confinement in the hot car. At the time of her arrest, Velasquez was booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder and held on a $2 million bond. Authorities noted that she had previously been investigated by Child Welfare Services, which had received multiple warnings about the safety of her children. When questioned, Velasquez tried to shift blame by claiming another person was supposed to be caring for the children. Investigators quickly confirmed that there was no evidence to support this claim. The facts pointed directly back to Velasquez, who had left her children alone despite repeated cautions in the past. On November 4, 2019, Velasquez appeared in Pinal County Superior Court and entered a guilty plea to 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of child abuse. She was sentenced on February 10, 2020, to 20 years in prison, followed by lifetime probation. If you enjoyed this and want to see more interesting videos, I'm going to be posting every day on this channel. I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Thank you very much.